Jerry Ashton here on WGRNradio.com and my program titled 15 Minutes of Fact, which has become my campaign to provide an oral history of the Occupy Wall Street movement, almost since its beginnings. Those familiar with the show, and I invite those of you who are not, to visit my archives to experience this for yourself, and that is the fact that I invite people to discuss their role in Occupy, their concerns with Occupy, their predictions for it. In other words, you're going to be able to listen directly to the people who are having an impact or are part of this, rather than getting a view of them by way of Main Street media and sound bites out there. So this will go a lot towards improving everyone's understanding of this phenomenon that we call Occupy Wall Street. Wherever you stand on Occupy, we can all agree that to this point, OWS has done a great job of, well, occupying. It has occupied spaces, notably Zuccotti Park, and Chicago, Portland, San Francisco, LA. I mean, lots of open spaces until that was shut down. It's occupied headlines almost all the time, conversations, but until now had not proven its true credentials by finding itself put to music. Now, given the impact of past protest music and movements and artists such as Joan Baez, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Phil Ochs, it had to be asked, where's the music? Well, our guest today, Jason Samel, known as Jay to his musician friends, well, he and his team have answered that question decisively by producing a just announced OWS music compilation called Occupy This Album. Google that, Occupy This Album. Now, just how that came about and the impact that this work intends to have will be the subject of a lot of press, and we're fortunate to have him here today to give us a personal, no-spin interview. So welcome to the show today, Jason.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much for having me today, man. I'm really psyched. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. Well, Jay, some people, and I'm one of those people, would say that you are as unlikely a person as can be imagined to have been the main source and inspiration for Occupy This Album.
Sure.
So why would they have that case to make for that, and what had you been doing with your life prior to Occupy that led you to it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a huge lover of music, Jerry, and I have been, as long as I can remember. I've been a musician since I'm 7 years old. But in terms of producing an album, I've never produced a single album in my life, not even my own album. And, you know, prior to getting involved in the Occupy Wall Street movement and really getting passionate about things like the Arab Spring, I've been in sales all my life. You know, I lost my job back in December of 2010. For lack of a better word, really, for speaking up for what I believed in and I thought was going on wrong with the company. I lost my position there. After that, I became really dissatisfied with, corporations in general, and just really didn't feel comfortable continuing to work for one any longer, and had interviewed a bit and looked in the job market and just really wasn't happy with anything that I saw, because I didn't want to work for corporations anymore because I didn't like the way that they were run. So I decided to open up my own company, with my father. We opened up an insurance business about 7 months ago. If I could plug that, Jamar Insurance in Jericho, New York.
Absolutely, plug that. We need all the money we can get for this cause. Exactly.
And yes, since then, I've been working with my father, but then, came September 17th, 2011. My whole entire life just got flipped upside down and changed because.
Well, actually, you've shortened this considerably for the audience. I'd like to point out, and in conversations I had with you, that what got your attention before Occupy even existed was something called the Arab Spring, and you actually participated in some fashion creating your first music towards this movement. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when the Arab Spring started to happen in Egypt, I became quickly impassioned. I could not pull myself away from the television. Even when I was away on vacation in Florida with my family, I just seemed to not want to be outside by the beach and wanted to be inside watching the television with everything that was going on. Pretty much the minute that it happened, like that happens often with musicians, when I became impassioned with it, I decided to write a song. The name of the song is Tahrir Revolution. Tahrir Square is where the Egypt Revolution really took its place. And I had taken that song, wrote it, recorded it within about a 24-hour period, and put it to some video, some photo clips, and put it up on YouTube. And not too long, I had tons of hits. Right now I think I stand at 60 or 70,000 hits on it. And then I decided to go and search. This was very beginning of the Egypt Revolution that I did this, and then I went on YouTube and searched on other people's videos to see if anybody else is doing this. Very few people at that time had done it, but over over the next few days, I noticed that there were just more and more people putting up YouTube videos and making songs about revolution and protest music again. It was just such a beautiful thing, and I said to myself, there's got to be a way. I mean, the world is changing before our very eyes constantly and consistently. How can we document this through my favorite medium in the world, through music and through the arts? So I had no idea really what I was going to do, but I decided I wanted to build a website. And I've never built a website in my life. And if you go to www.musicforegypt.com, you can very easily tell that I've never built a website in my life because it's not the prettiest thing to look at in the world.
But this proves that case that content is king in your case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, content is king, and talk about content. It came flowing in from all over the world. We got music that people sent us in. From all over the world, having to do with revolutions from all over the world, and poetry and people's revolution stories. And we just took all that stuff and compiled it and put it up on the internet for people to see. And I was getting a lot of hits and a lot of action, and it was really cool. And eventually that led to me opening up another site, which is called musicforrevolution.com, which is somewhat the same type of site, but really for all-encompassing revolution rather than just Egypt.
Okay, Jason. So now we can safely fast forward to the time that the Occupy movement came about. So tell me about how you became aware of that and what then has led to what we now know to be an album called Occupy This Album.
Sure. I mean, I could not have been any more excited on September 17th, 2011, after being, really heavily into the things that were going on in the Arab Spring. All of a sudden I turned the television and wow, it pops up in my backyard. These same protests that were going on across the world all of a sudden are literally, I live, maybe 2 minutes from New York City. And, all of a sudden there's these protests going on there. I said I had to go and check it out. So 2 days later, after watching it grow on television for a couple of days, I went to Occupy Wall Street and spent some time down there and just walked around and just saw everything that was going on and just became very, very sucked in very, very quickly because I just thought that the conversations that were being had there and just the energy there was this renewed energy that I never saw before.
Well, I do not know that part of that renewed energy was shall we say, vocalized or?
Yeah. Well, that was, the next day, Jerry, I went back to, on September 20th, went back to Occupy Wall Street, wanted to check it out again. And I went down there and I was walking through Zuccotti Park, and I heard this sound of a guitar and harmonica, and then this voice with belting the best lyrics that I'd heard in a long time. And I went and just got enthralled with this guy and listened to him for a while and listened to him play his music and then introduced myself to him after he stopped playing. And I said, "Hey, Jason Samuel, nice to meet you." And he says, "Hey, Matt Pless." And I'm like, "Hey, man, you play some great music." He says, "Yeah, thanks, man." And then I said, "Hey, do you have a card? I'd love to maybe, collaborate with you somehow, in the future." And he said, "Yeah, hold on." And he takes out a small piece of cardboard, which I have sitting right in front of me here. And he just wrote his name in brown magic marker on it and said, "Hey, Matt Pless, look me up. Go Google me. You'll find me." I said, "Okay." So, then I walked away from him and then just was walking around the park and, would see people playing guitar right next to some hip hop artists that were rapping over the guitar, and would walk another 100 feet and hear some reggae people, and they were singing some music, and
don't forget the drummers.
Yeah, well, then those drummers at the other end of the park, and heard that, and I said, wow, there's just such amazing music growing out of 3 days of a movement. I really think that this is going to take off, and I think it's going to grow. And I know that music has to be a part of that. And then my biggest issue is the fact that I heard this guy, Matt Pless, playing amazing music with amazing lyrics. And nobody's ever heard of this guy. Nobody knows who he is. And I said to myself, how can I help the movement all at the same time, shine a light on a guy like Matt Pless that nobody's ever heard of? How can I give him a voice that he hasn't had before? And at that moment, on September 20th, I decided I wanted to create a compilation album with different musicians from Occupy Wall Street. And heck, if I could somehow find a couple of famous people who would want to take the light that shined on them and redirect it on people like Matt and join this album, well, that would be amazing. I had no idea how I was going to do it at that time, but that was the idea.
Well, let me stop you right there for a second, because you hit on a key thing. Your phrase, how could I help? It appears to me that what distinguishes the Occupy movement is that people enter into it not for hope of gain so much as where can I give my best gifts? Yeah. Where can I make a difference? And this was the way that you found yourself.
Yeah.
Now, nobody ever does anything like this on their own, whether it be at Occupy or in the world in general. So who were the early people who showed up then to make this happen? Those artists, those helpmeets, who are they?
Yeah, well, I mean, you certainly obviously had Matt Pless, and then and some other occupiers that I had met. This guy Goldie, who was involved very closely in the movement and music. But then one day through some odd chance happenings, I had actually got introduced to Michael Moore, and being introduced to Michael Moore was great. I've always been a fan of his work that he's done, and got introduced to him. And I had asked him if he would want to be on an Occupy Wall Street benefit album, and he said, "Do you mean sing?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, well, only if I could sing "The Times Are Changing" by Bob Dylan. The times they're changing. And I said, well, I don't know how we're going to make that happen, but if we can make that happen somehow, absolutely. I couldn't think of a more perfect song for Michael Moore to sing, a Bob Dylan song that was one of the most relevant 60s protest songs out there. Time went on, and eventually we got permissions from Bob Dylan to be able to do that. But that, Michael Moore was the first guy who said, yes, I'll come on board. And he wasn't even the musician, but turns out he's not a bad musician after all.
Well, now that we're on the subject of musicians, did you have any surprises? Are there people that you could tell us that are on there that we need to know about?
God, any 99 of them, Jerry. There's 99 artists on the album. Anywhere from Jackson Browne to Crosby and Nash, to Lloyd Cole, to Debbie Harry, Blondie, Richard Barone, Jill Sobule, Uncle, Our Lady Peace, Immortal Technique, Warren Haynes, Joan Baez, Steve Earle, James McCurtry, Kit Malone, Dar Williams, Arlo Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Tao Seeger, Mogwai.
Well, what you're telling me is that, yes, Occupy Wall Street has found its voice and its voices. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then it's not just the big names that's important to us here. It's the Matt Plesses and George Martinez and the Global Block Collective, who's penned a track that's been known throughout the movement as the official Occupy Wall Street hip hop anthem, to people like Kanaska Carter, who came down from Canada and spent time from Canada in Zuccotti Park for quite a bit of time, and just blessed people with her beautiful voice and her music there. These folks all wanted to be part of this project, and I couldn't be more enthralled.
Well, let's talk also about the producers that were part of this, and then I want you to give credit to the real heroes, the personal ones that helped you do this, and that would be your wife and your parents.
Yeah. Yeah, the quick story of me meeting the people, other folks that I brought on to help this project, is I had on the way home from a wedding. That this is just how odd things happened with me meeting all of these different interesting individuals. Is I was coming home from a wedding, from my best friend's wedding in Florida. I was in LaGuardia Airport, and my wife taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Jason, there's Jane's Addiction standing there." And I said, "No way." And I looked over, and there's Dave Navarro and Perry Farrell standing there, 20 feet from me. And I go over there, and I just introduce myself to them and get into a conversation with them, and quickly turned Occupy Wall Street. Then exchanged some phone numbers. They invited me to a show in New York City. I went to the show in New York City, got to hang out with them and spend the time with them, and they were just wonderful and really backed Occupy Wall Street quite a bit. And then after the show, went outside, and this is already after I'd gotten Michael Moore on board and a few other musicians, and I'd gone outside, and I was hanging out with my wife outside, and I'm one to talk to everyone. So I turned my head, and there's this woman, Megan Hayward, that's standing there, and I just introduced myself to her, and she says, "Hey, nice to meet you." And we got involved in a conversation. Like every conversation I have, Occupy Wall Street again comes up, and told them this project that I'm working on. And she says, "Hey, well, I'm the chief operating officer of Soundtrack Studios in New York City, right down the block from here." I said, "Wow, that's crazy. That's great." I said, "We should talk and see how we might be able to work together." And she was with her friend there, Alex Emanuel, who's a professional actor, who's a professional actor as well as indie musician, and we all got to talking just a couple of days later, and I asked if they wanted to help out make this album possible. And they did, and they certainly were a great help.
Well, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Time does fly, and this fairly well completes our 15 minutes of fact with you today, Jason. Although, given all that you've had to say, and you still need to say about Occupy and what this album comprises, I may be tempted to change my format of the show to 99 minutes for the 99%.
That'd be wonderful.
So I thank you for that. So as for reaching you, Jay, I would like to have people know that you can be located on Twitter as @MusicForOccupy, on Facebook as Music for Occupy, and of course you can be emailed at musicforoccupy@gmail.com.
That's correct.
And as for reaching me, folks, you can write me at writtenoffUSA@gmail.com. Visit me on Twitter as writtenoffUSA. Visit the Huffington Post today and search out Jerry Ashton for a companion piece that we wrote for this conversation that we just now had, and you'll find that posted there. So signing off for WGRNradio.com, it's Jerry Ashton with 15 minutes of fact, thanking Jason Samwell for creating Occupy this album.
Thanks so much for having me, Jerry.
You bet.
All right, take care.